Okay, so in this training today, we are going to learn what is meant by inter-VLAN routing. So as you can remember previously, we learned how to do VLAN configuration. We learned how to configure VLANs on the switches, and through what we learned, you could easily identify that by default, devices in different VLANs cannot communicate, but different devices in same VLAN will communicate. So in every network we'll have different VLANs, and we will need some VLANs to communicate, and we will restrict some VLANs. For us to enable VLANs to communicate, then we will have to do what is called inter-VLAN routing, which is a protocol. So we can see that therefore to enable them to communicate, we should implement inter-VLAN routing. So thus inter-VLAN routing refers to a process in which we make different, it's a process, and we make different VLANs, virtual LANs or VLANs, to communicate with each other irrespective of where the VLAN are present. So inter-VLAN routing can be achieved. We can implement inter-VLAN routing either on a router or a layer 3 switch. So when we implement inter-VLAN routing on a router, we call it a router on a stick. Not route, but router on a stick. ROAS. But whenever we implement, whenever we implement inter-VLAN routing on a layer 3 switch, RO switch, ROAS. Whenever we implement inter-VLAN routing on a layer 3 switch, then it's called switch virtual interface, SVI. So what's the difference between router on a stick, not route, but a router on a stick? What's the difference between a router on a stick and SVI, or switch virtual interface? In a router on a stick, we divide a single interface into sub-interfaces. For example, we've been configuring gig 00. So for example, if we had VLAN 10, VLAN 20, VLAN 30 in our network, how will we carry out subnetting? We are going to create sub-interfaces on a router. Like sub-interface, like if the physical interface was gig 00, then the sub-interface can be gig 00.10, gig 00.20, gig 00.30 according to VLAN number. And the VLAN and the sub-interfaces will act as the default gateway to the respective VLAN. So for example, for VLAN 10, the sub-interface of the router, which is gig 00.10, will be the default gateway of VLAN 10. So for example, if this was VLAN 10, and let's just assume that this was a router. So the sub-interface, which is gig 010, is the default gateway of this PC. And what is a switch virtual interface? A single SVI switch virtual interface can be created for a VLAN. So for example, if you have VLAN 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, we can create SVI for each VLAN. So for example, SVI for VLAN 10, another for VLAN 20, VLAN 30, 40, 50, etc., etc. So likewise, the same way the sub-interface acted as the default gateway of a respective VLAN, the SVI will also act as the default gateway for that VLAN. So in this demo, for more notes or for more materials, I will send them. And for this demo, let's start with router on a stick inter-VLAN routing. So I'll go back and open my Packet Tracer. And in this case, we need a router, 2911 router. We need a switch. and I need let's say 3 computers. I just need 3 VLANs, each containing 2 computers, and I will connect them, use automatic. Okay, so quickly I'll do this. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just do comments very fast. Okay, so this is VLAN 30, VLAN 20, VLAN 10. So VLAN 10 has that network, VLAN 20 has this network, VLAN 30 has that network. So what I'll do, I'll just assign them IP addresses. For example, this one is it should be 192.10. And I want to make gateway 12.1. So this should take 20 dot something. I'll start with 20.10. Copy that, and the gateway 12.20.1, and this one should be 20.20, 20.20, and gateway to have 20.1 close, and finally we got this side, and we send them IP address very fast. 30.10. Copy this. 30.1, and finally this one. 30.20 is enough. Okay. Okay, so in this demo, we're going to start with the way I've said, router on a stick. And for a router on a stick, we are going to create sub interfaces according to the VLAN numbers. So the first step that we do, we assign these computers, these host devices, VLAN numbers. So for example, these two hosts, VLAN 10, VLAN 20, VLAN 30. So we need to go to this switch and create VLANs and assign ports VLAN IDs. Okay, so let's just click on that switch first. Come to CLI, then enable config T. All right, so come here and we check which interface is that. It's F02 on the switch here. This is F02, and the other one is F03 here. It's F03, F02, F03. So you come to switch and you say interface range. Before that, let's create the VLANs first before sending them to ports. So we need how many VLANs? 3 VLANs. VLAN 10 first, VLAN 10. Then let's name it IT. Then another one is VLAN 20. Then name it HR. Another one is VLAN 30. Then name it finance field. Exit. And now let's see our VLAN. So just say do show VLAN. And you can see the VLANs are here. VLAN 10, 20, 30. They are active, but they don't have any interfaces assigned. You can see interfaces are assigned under default VLAN 1. So we need to assign them interfaces. Okay. For VLAN 10, we have seen that it's connected to F42 and F03. This one is F42 and F03. So we go back to the same switch, and we now assign those ports VLAN ID. So interface range FA02 to 3, range from FA02 to 3. Then we say switch port mode access, then switch port access VLAN 10. Very important. So it's very simple command. Enter the range of the interfaces, then make them to be access mode, then assign the VLAN IDs to the ports. Okay, exit. So let's move here. This is FA04 and FA05. So the same way we do interface range FA0/4 to 5. Then we just say switch port mode access. Then switch port access VLAN 20 because it's here, and hit enter. You exit. Finally, we come here. This F407, F406. So it's from 6 to 7. So interface range FA0/6 to 7. Switch port mode access. Then switch port access VLAN 30. Exit. And save to right. Always remember to save. Now, if you can now display VLANs, remember the time we were displaying VLANs, these were not assigned anything, but you could see VLAN 1 had everything on it. So we need to, we have already assigned ports to this VLAN. So we need to display the same command again to verify if they have this VLAN have been assigned port numbers. All right, so we just say do show VLAN and you hit enter. So you can see VLAN 10 IT has these two interfaces, VLAN 20 HR has these two interfaces, VLAN 30 finance has those two interfaces. So we are good to go. We have assigned VLANs to the ports and configure the computers to have IP addresses. So let's test first the communication. We said by default devices in different VLANs will not communicate, but different devices in same VLANs will communicate. So just click on the PC. This was 10.20. So I'll try to ping 10.20. Ping 192.168.10.20. So it's going, but if I try to ping 20.20 or 30.20, there will be no communication. Why? By default, devices in different VLANs will never communicate by default. The right term is by default, because we can do something there and make them communicate. So the something that we want to do here is called inter-VLAN routing, and in this video we started with router on a stick. So I'll just write here ROAS, router on a stick, inter-VLAN routing. Okay, so we have done with this switch. Remember, this switch has already have now it has 4 VLANs. The default VLAN, which is VLAN 1, then VLAN 10 that VLAN 10, 20, 30 and 40. VLAN 10, 20, 30 that we've just configured. So the first VLAN is VLAN 1, which is default. It comes with the switch. You cannot modify it, you cannot configure it. It's there. Now we've configured 3 VLANs plus the default one. There are 4 VLANs. And we would need, because this is the router that will enable these devices to communicate, we will need information to come from this, let's say from VLAN 10, to go to the router, and the router to enable it to communicate to VLAN 20 or VLAN 30. Meaning that information or data or traffic will be passing through this interface. You see this? Yeah. It will be going this way, then the router will forward it back. From VLAN 20 will go this way, and the router will forward it back. So this link here must be trunk interface, because trunk can access multiple VLANs at the same time, can allow passage of multiple VLANs. Remember, access port can only access one VLAN at a time. So this one must be trunk port. That one should be trunk port to allow all these VLANs to pass, to go to the router and come back. All right, so let's assign this one the role of trunk. So which interface is this one? FA01. Interface FA0/1. Just say switch port mode trunk and you hit enter, exit, then do right. Always make sure that this is trunk. If this is not trunk, you won't achieve your objective, because you have a lot of VLANs to pass through, and they cannot pass through an access port. By default, all ports on a switch are access ports, so you have to make this one trunk. All right, so all the configurations are done on the switch. So we move to the upper layer, which is on the router. Remember, the first step was the topology, assigning the network and the VLAN, just the comments, and configuring the PCs with the right IP addresses. Then we created the VLANs on the switch. Then we assigned the VLANs on the switch, on the ports that are connecting to each VLAN. Okay. Then finally enable trunk port here to enable all these VLANs to go to the router and come back. All right. Now the next phase of configuration is done here on the router. Just click on the router and place it somewhere here. And the first thing that we do, we confirm which port is this. This is gig 00. You can see it's gig 00. Click on it, come to CLI and just say no and enable config. And now we say here gig 00 to be, let's turn it up. You know, it's shut down by default. So let's say interface gig 0/0, no shutdown, turn it up. So you can see it has turned green. It has turned green, right? All right. So the concept of route on a stick, inter-VLAN routing. What do we do? You check the connecting interface. We found that it's gig 00. And now here we create sub interfaces as per the VLAN IDs here. This is VLAN 10. To create a sub interface of VLAN 10, we just say interface gig 0/0 20.10. It's a sub interface of this. This one is a child of this, and this child reference to VLAN 10 should reference. It should reference to VLAN 10. So you just hit enter. Okay, so you can see this one interface change to app. Yeah, it has been created. Now we've said that this one should reference to VLAN 10. So let's create the link between this interface and VLAN 10. How do we create the link? You just say encapsulation .1q10. You just write en, then you hit on tab, it will complete encapsulation, then write d and hit tab, it will complete .1q, and write the VLAN number. We said that this one should reference to VLAN 10. Now we've created a link to VLAN 10 using this command encapsulation .1q10, and you hit enter. And we said, guys, the sub interfaces should be assigned. We said the first interface, the sub interface, should be assigned IP address, and that IP address should act as the default gateway of the respective VLAN. For example, this is a sub interface that should reference to VLAN 10, and that sub interface we should assign it IP address that act as the default gateway of VLAN 10. So the default gateway of VLAN 10 was supposed to be, you can see, it was supposed to be 10.10.10.1. I mean 1 and 2 168.10.1. Yeah, so let's assign it. Just say IP address to be 192.168.10.1, and subnet mask, don't forget 55.255.255.0, and you hit enter. You exit now that sub interfaces, and now you create another sub interface for VLAN 20. Now we come to VLAN 20. You just use this physical interface to create the children, because you know they are the one coming here. So the interface gig 0/0. Now for a child that will reference to VLAN 20 is .20. Then now create the link. How do we create the link? Encapsulation .1q20. Link it to VLAN 20 here, and you hit enter. After that, just assign it IP address. The IP address was just write IP address, IP add to be 192.168.20.1. Subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and you hit enter. Then you exit that sub interface. And finally, we create a sub interface for VLAN 30. How do you do that? We just use the same physical interface, which is gig 00. Then the sub interface for VLAN 30 should be .30, and you hit enter. Now link it to VLAN 30, encapsulation .1q30, and assign it IP address. IP add to be 192.168.30.1. 255, don't forget subnet mask 255.255.0. Exit. And with this, we are done configuring Inter-VLAN routing using router on a stick. Now, if I can just go back to this router here, this computer, in a try to ping, the first time I pinged 20.20 here, 20.20, nothing happened. Now let me try to ping again 20.20, and let me see if it will ping. Just a minute. It should, yeah. So it's pinging. Now let's ping 30.20. 30.20 also should ping, because we enabled inter-VLAN routing using router on a stick. Router on a stick, just one stick, but we create little sub-interfaces of that stick. And those sub-interfaces should reference to VLANs. So if I hover over this router here, you will see those sub-interfaces created. You will see the first interface gig 00, another one is gig 00.10, gig 00.20, gig 00.30, gig 01, gig 02. Yeah, so physically we have gig 00, but virtually we have virtual children of gig 00 as .10, .20, and .30. So that's a way to configure inter-VLAN routing using router on a stick. Very simple and easily explained. So maybe if you have any question so that I can clarify.
So I got lost at the point when you were talking about the trunk port from router 0. I couldn't understand.
Okay. The trunk port is set on a switch, not on the router. So the reason why we set up a trunk port here is to enable all of these VLANs to pass through to the router. Remember, if this one is an access, remember by default, all ports on a switch are access ports, and an access port cannot allow passage of multiple VLANs. Remember, here we have how many VLANs? 1, 2, 3, plus the default one. Now there will be 4 VLANs. Now VLAN 1, which is the default VLAN, VLAN 10, 20, 30 that we just created. Those are 4 VLANs. They cannot pass here if you've not configured this as a trunk. So we have to make this one trunk first for them to pass through. Anything else? Or don't you understand that still? Hello?
Sorry, I understand, sir.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So any question?
I'm okay. I will if for those when I get lost at some point, I go and check the video, and from there I understand better.
Okay, sure. Okay, so for the next, we need to complete them today, because tomorrow we need to do another thing. So the next phase is to configure switch virtual interface, which is very easy today. Very easy. It's quite much easier than router on a stick. Okay, so for a switch virtual interface, just we create what is called SVI, switch virtual interface router. Inter-VLAN routing using layer 3 switch. Layer 3 switch work both as a switch and a router. Okay, so I'll just extend this on this side, somewhere there, and I would like to use this one still. Oh no, you want to understand better, let me just create another topology very fast. So I need switches, 2960 switches. Let's say I want 3 of them still. 3 of them. 3 of them, and a multi-layer switch. For a multi-layer switch, just choose this is a multi-layer switch. There are 2, 3560 and 3650. So just choose the 3650, and for this I'll copy the computers. Copy, and I paste somewhere here. Oh no, just a minute. Just want to copy the computers. Good. Copy, paste. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. So I want to put them there. Okay. Okay. So remember, I have configured these computers on the other video. No need of this now. Okay. So we connect them. Here we are going to use layer 3 switch, which this is a layer 3 switch. And one of these fine days we need to navigate layer 3 switch, understand a lot of issues with it. So this is a multi-VLAN inter-VLAN routing using multi-layer or layer 3 switch. Some people call it multi-layer, others call it layer 3 switch. In production network we call it the core switch. So both applies: core switch, multi-layer switch, layer 3 switch. And I make, so that's VLAN 10. I've configured IP address, as you can remember there, and this is VLAN 30. I've also configured IP address, as you can remember there, and finally blue, this is VLAN 20. Okay, so if you go over these computers, you'll see I've configured 10.10.10. then this default gateway is there. If you come here, also applies. If you come here, also applies. So what you're going to do is to begin configuring VLANs on these switches, the access layer switches, this one. So we should configure VLANs for example, let's say this was HR department, IT department, and finance department. So all ports, let's just assume that except this one, all ports except this one should be in VLAN 10. Here also all ports on this switch except this one, because I told you that this one should always be trunk. This one should be all ports except this one should be VLAN 20. Same applies here. So let's go here and say this. Come here, and the first thing we do now, enable config T. The first thing we do, let's make this one trunk first before we come and configure VLANs here. So this one is FA01. So interface FA0/1. Then we just say switch port mode trunk, and that's all that switch. Come to this switch and make the same FA01 interface enable config T interface FA0/1 switch port mode trunk. Finally, you come to this switch and you say enable config T interface FA0/1 switch port mode trunk. Okay, so let's go to each individual switch to configure VLANs and assign them to ports. So I click on this switch, I come, exit, and let's create VLAN. just say VLAN 10. Don't forget to create VLAN 10, name it as IT, exit. Now let's assign ports this VLAN ID. So interface FA, let's say range FA 0/2, because /1 is this one. So let me just see, /2 to 3. Let's I just want it to 24, because there are 24 ports on a switch. So on this switch you can see there are 24 first Ethernet ports. So I want all of them to be in VLAN 10. So interface FA 0/2 to 24, because /1 is trunk. So all the remaining one, let's make them VLAN 10. So let's say switch port mode access, then switch port access VLAN 10, exit and do right. We are done with that switch. We won't come back here again. So let's go do this, and the same thing applies. Interface range FA 0/2 to 24, then switch port mode access, then switch port access VLAN 20. Oh, we did create VLAN here, exit. Let's create VLAN. You can see access VLAN does not exist, creating VLAN. You know, when the VLAN is not existing, it creates when you enter that VLAN. So it has created a VLAN, but it doesn't have a name. So if you can just say do show VLAN, you will see there is a, just a minute. There is VLAN 20 here, and the name is VLAN 0020. So it just generates a random name and gives it. So let's just create that VLAN. Let's recreate that VLAN and give it a name. So VLAN 20, name HR, exit. So if you can just say do show VLAN again, do show VLAN, you will see HR is here with the ports here. All right. So okay, so we move to this switch, and I want to challenge you here now, because there was a time I received a challenge. One day I want to add some PCs here, I want to add some computers here. I just want to add some computers here, and copy. Now here, this one is here, this one is here, and I make this one is VLAN 40 under the same switch. Okay, and I connect them. So I will start connecting them from, I want to start connecting them from F10. Yes, F10. Sorry, I want to start connecting from F10 now to and F12. So I will say from F2 to F9 should have VLAN 30. Then from F10 to F24 should be VLAN 40. All right. So I go here, exit, then interface. No, just create VLAN first. VLAN 30. Name it finance, exit. VLAN 40, name it admin. Okay, exit. So we are now allowed to assign ports, roles, these VLAN IDs. So I can just say do show VLAN. You will see this VLAN 30 and VLAN 40, they don't have interface assigned yet. So we need to do that to facilitate intermittent routing configuration. So I go here and say this VLAN 2, FA02 and FA03. And we said that from FA02 to FA09 should be VLAN 30, then from FA010 to 24, VLAN 40. Okay. So you just say interface range FA0/2 to 9. Just say switchport mode access, then switchport access VLAN 30, and you hit enter, exit. Then we go here also to configure. We go where, how, interface range FA0/10 to 24, switchport mode access, then switchport access VLAN 40, exit, and we are done with everything on that switch. As long as this is trunk, all of these VLANs will pass through. So it doesn't matter how many VLANs you configure, they will pass through as long as this is trunk. And as you remember, the first thing that we did was to configure this as trunk. So we are done at the lower level. So let's move to the upper level. When we move to the upper level, the first thing that we do is to remember this one is trunk, this is trunk, this is trunk, but this is a switch. Even if it's a layer 3 switch, even if it's a multi-layer switch, it has both switching and routing capability. So these are switch ports. You see, these are switch ports by default. So if a switch to a switch connects, then both ends should be trunk. Remember, on the router, we were not doing anything on the router because a router doesn't have switch port. We were only configuring trunk on this side, but not on this side, because this is a layer 3 interface. We assign them IP addresses based on the sub interfaces. But now here, this is a switch, and a switch to a switch, both ends should be trunk. So we make this one a trunk, we make this one a trunk, and this one a trunk. So this is gig 101, gig 102, and finally gig 103. So if you come here, the device must be powered on first. Good. How do you do? If you receive that error, just click on the multi-layer switch, and you see this one, AC power supply. Just drag it to this empty slot and leave it there. And if you come here, you will see the switch is booting. Just close it and give it some 10 seconds. Then you go back and you start configuration. Remember, this one is switch to switch. This one must be trunk. Yeah, because a switch to switch, both ends should be trunk to enable facilitating communication and transfer of VLANs from one switch to another. So I'll click on it again. I believe now it has booted. So just say no, and now you can see it's just a switch. Although it's a multi-layer switch, it can do both routing and switching. Enable config terminal. Yeah. So the first thing that you do, as I have said, make this one, and this one trunk. So I'll click on it. This one was gig 11, gig 101, gig 102, and gig 103. So from gig 1 to gig 3, interface range gig 1/0/1 to 3, switchport mode trunk, and hit enter, exit. And now we are done on configuring trunk on this interface. Remember, as per now, if I can just try to ping from this PC here, before I can complete interval routing, just ping 192.168.10.10. there will be no communication. There will be no communication. Why? Because we will not achieve inter-VLAN routing. So we need to do inter-VLAN routing to enable the device to the devices in the network to communicate. Yes. So there will be no communication. So let me try even for 30 something. Then I'll try all of them later when we shall have achieved inter-VLAN routing. And 30 or something. So both of them are unsuccessful. So I'll just close that one. And let's go back to our switch here. So in the switch here, as I have said, this is a switch. Although it can perform both routing and switching. By default, it's just a switch. It just acts as a switch by default. So for it to perform routing functionality, then we should enable that routing functionality. So before we can proceed with the configuring inter-VLAN routing, as the name suggests, inter-VLAN routing, let's enable routing capability on this multi-layer switch. How do we do that? Just click on the switch and say IP routing. That's all. This command will enable routing on this switch. Previously, it was just acting as a normal switch, but after enabling this command, it can now act as a switch and a router. All right. So let's begin creating inter-VLAN routing. Back in the document here, we see that a single SVI, which stands for Switch Virtual Interface, can be created for a VLAN. The SVI created for respective VLAN acts as a default gateway for that VLAN. So how do we create these SVIs? Switch Virtual Interface. Just click on the switch. The first thing that you do, make sure you create all of these VLANs 10, 20, 30, 40 on this switch also. Make sure you create VLAN 10, VLAN 20, VLAN 30 and VLAN 40 on this switch first. So click on it and just create VLAN 10. It's not a must to give it a name here. Actually, it's not a must to give it a name here, but you know, for good practice, just name it. VLAN 10 was our which was our, I think, IT. Then VLAN 20 was our HR, name HR. VLAN 30 was our finance. And finally, VLAN 40 was our admin. So you have to make sure that this switch has all the available VLANs in the network, all of them. Even if you had 100, make sure this switch here has all of the available VLANs. After doing that, now you can proceed to create what is called SVI, Switch Virtual Interface. Switch Virtual Interface. So how do we create Switch Virtual Interface? We just enter interface VLAN 10 and that's all. That's how to create a Switch Virtual Interface. For example, interface VLAN 10, interface VLAN 20, VLAN 30, interface VLAN 40, etc, etc, and hit enter. Now you assign it IP address. The IP address of VLAN 10 should be 10.1, then 255.255.255.0. and you hit enter. Oh, IP address, IP address, just like that, and you hit enter. Then you go back and create another SVI for VLAN 20. So just say interface VLAN 20, and you just send it IP address which was 20.1. Exit. Then you go for VLAN 30, and you assign the IP address which was 30.1. 30.1. And finally, you go for VLAN 40. VLAN 40, and you assign the IP address which was 40.1. Did I really configure IP address to the computers? Exit and do right. We are done configuring Inter-VLAN on this multi-layer switch. So before that, I did configure IP address to these computers, so I'll do it very fast to save time. I forgot to sign IP address there. 12.168.40.10. Yes, copy, and finally, yes. So come here. Sorry, 40.20 now. Here remain 40.1. Good. So we're just done, and that's how just to configure Inter-VLAN routing on a layer 3 switch. So we just create SVIs. So if I can just say do show start, you can see the sub interfaces, the SVIs, we call them SVIs. These are SVIs. They've been created there and have been assigned IP address that corresponds to respective VLAN. The first thing you do, create VLANs. Make all of these trunks, then enable routing, create VLANs, and create sub interfaces. Sorry, not sub interfaces, the SVIs, switch virtual interfaces. Sub interfaces applies here on the router, not here. So if I can just test communication, let me try from even the middle network. Ping 192.168.10.10. It should communicate. Yes. So another one is 20.20. It's already 20. That is in a 20 network, so there's no need because it will communicate by default. 30, and finally 40. So that's just a way to configure Inter-VLAN routing both on the router and a multi-layer switch. So maybe if you have a question here, it's very simple, very simple and very interesting. I will gladly answer. Do you get any question?
No.
Yeah, you understand it better?
But at some point for mid-layer switch, there is a lot of things. Yeah.
Okay. I think this video will really help you. Will really guide you. Yeah. Yeah. So I believe that will mark the end of this class because I can see it's 19:10 here.
Yeah, it's 10 here. Yeah, it's time to.
Okay, so I'll just end the video and send you the classes later.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye. Thank you. Have a good day.
See you tomorrow.
See you, bro.
You too. Have a good night. Yeah.